Yo, what's up? Dr. Swole here, MD, pro natural physique athlete. Today, joined again by Menno Henselmans, who you've seen featured on this channel quite a bit. And as you can tell, I think he's one of the best resources out there for evidence-based fitness. And today we're going to be delving into supplements. Supplements are a tricky subject and definitely something of a lot of controversy, and that gets a lot of attention in the bodybuilding sphere. So today we're going to be busting a lot of myths. We're going to talk about some of the most valuable supplements to bodybuilders, the mechanisms of benefit, and how much and how to take them. So thanks again for being on the show, Menno.
All right, let's get into it. Must feel good, right? The pro title.
Yeah, it's awesome. It was the life goal. So pretty excited about that. So yeah, we're going to be talking about a pretty short list today. And I think that's going to be a big theme of the conversation where, making people realize that supplements are really a very small slice of the pie. And I think this is one of the big things that people get wrong in the fitness industry. And especially if when you start delving into the actual bodybuilding industry itself, you realize that a lot of the money is made off of supplements. And often when you look at what influencers are doing online, or you look closely at internet articles, you realize that a lot of it is just designed to sell supplements. Like, people are posting these articles where they're just like, the top three pillars of fitness: training, nutrition, and supplements. And like, they make it seem like supplements are a big deal and a really big part of their journey. And there's a lot of false advertising and information that goes out there, which hopefully we will lay some of that to rest today. So I think starting off, we're just going to be going through some of the supplements that are going to be useful to you and things to actually consider about them. So I think start off, one of the biggest ones we should talk about is creatine, because this is one of the best studied sports supplements for bodybuilders out there. So yeah, if you could start us off, Menno.
Yeah, creatine is immensely well studied. It's crazy how much research there is on creatine. And we mostly haven't come any further in terms of practical advice than where we were like 20 years ago, even almost 30. We know a lot more about what it does, but it's still the good old 3 to 5 grams for most people. For some muscular men, 5. For most people, 3. I think 0.03 gram per kilogram is a good general guideline. For most people, it's about 3 grams. And you take that every day with first meal of the day or the post-workout meal. There is actually interesting research that shows post-workout works better than pre-workout, especially probably for people with high training frequency, because the absorption might be better, or there might be a greater potential elevation in creatine stores. Like, the body will allow greater creatine storage, because that's how creatine functions, right? You consume more of it, and then the body has more creatine phosphate. And creatine phosphate can be broken down in the muscle because the bond between creatine and phosphate is very high in energy. So it's high energy phosphate bond. And by breaking that down, there is very rapid energy provision. So it's the ATP-CP system, the ATP creatine phosphate system, which is responsible for sort of our, what do you call that in an engine? The nitro boost, where you sort of kickstart the engine. So almost all activities start with the creatine phosphate system. ATP itself is theoretically the original start, but it's like a second. And then after that, you get more of the effects of burning carbohydrates and fats. But the first 10, 15 seconds or so are actually mostly the creatine phosphate system. So if you have more creatine in your system, there's more of a reserve to replenish those creatine phosphate stores. And you can supply energy for longer to your muscles, so your muscles can do more work. And your performance is better, and over time you gain some more muscle and some more strength. And creatine is pretty much as good as it gets. It's one of the few supplements that actually works in about 2/3 of individuals. There is a continuum of creatine response, which seems to depend mostly on how much creatine you already store naturally in your muscles. If they're already full, then you can't do much. And so interestingly, there is research showing that people that benefit more from creatine supplementation are the people that have more fast twitch muscle fibers, because they have greater potential for more creatine uptake in their muscles. Like, fast twitch muscle fibers have higher potential creatine stores. So they are sort of lucky on both regards, assuming they don't want to be endurance trainees at least. And yeah, there are some people like me who are almost as true non-responders. And the best way probably that you can identify if you're a responder, other than actually tracking your work capacity, which is in seeing like, does your performance improve, is your weight. So funny enough, in my experience, the people that complain the most about creatine are the people that actually get the most benefits from it. Because people that, especially women, they often don't like to see that their weight goes up 1 or 2 kilos when they start supplementing it, especially during a loading phase. But it's all intramuscular water. So it's actual muscle mass for all intents and purposes. It also makes you stronger, and it makes you look better. So it's good. It means you're responding, your body's soaking up the creatine. So that's actually a very good sign. If your weight spikes during a loading phase, then, which is, by the way, you don't have to do a loading phase, but I do recommend it because A, you get the benefits faster, and B, there is some research showing you might still get greater effects, although it's marginal. And the research is much more consistent for creatine loading. So creatine loading is much more well studied. But in any case, if you do the loading phase and you notice that your weight goes up, like I said, it's a good sign. It's a luxury problem essentially.
Yeah, no, it's interesting how people get the water weight thing wrong, and people shy away from water weight, or they jump onto the water weight thing with something like keto. In terms of creatine cycling, do you recommend people take time off it?
No, you can take it indefinitely. It has potent health benefits, actually. So if anything, for the prevention of concussions and the cognitive performance, that alone could be reasons to take it.
Yeah, no, I think that's creatine is probably one of the best supplements that will actually, be useful for people out there. Moving on, I think the next one I wanted to bring up was caffeine. So I think caffeine it's interesting because it's so, ubiquitous, and it's cool to see that there could actually be some applications.
Yeah, creatine or caffeine, also there's the interaction between the two. There are a lot of still somewhat unresolved and very controversial parts about caffeine supplementation. I think many people believe that the state of research on caffeine is like, it works, and you use it more, and you get a physical boost in performance. There are actually a few big problems with that idea. For one, and I think this is one of the most striking findings, which is very, very consistent and well established at this point. There is no dose response effect of creatine supplementation, of caffeine supplementation. So if you take more caffeine, you do not get more benefits. In fact, a meta-analysis from last month or last week even found that there was no dose response effect of caffeine supplementation up to 6 milligram per kilogram, which is like 6 Red Bulls for the average individual. And after that, the benefits were actually lower. So that very strongly indicates not only is there no dose response effect, at some point, presumably the side effects like anxiety, shaky, twitchiness, maybe digestive symptoms actually become worse than the potential ergogenic effects. And as far as the ergogenic effect, what would the effect be if it doesn't have a dose response effect? That's very mysterious, because normally, like, you're into medicine, right? Like, do you know any drug that does not have different effects when you alter the dosage?
Yeah.
Not many, right?
No.
It's very rare. And I think that is because with caffeine, the main benefit is motivational. It's simply being more aroused. And there is a limit to how aroused, you're still is good for you. Like if you're like bouncing off the walls, it doesn't really help compared to just being like in the zone,
If you're not putting your gym buddies in chokeholds and screaming, lightweight.
You always have to follow that up with baby. You always have to say lightweight, baby. But yeah, it's I think it's mostly psychological. And there's also research showing that untrained individuals benefit more than trained individuals, which is probably also largely motivational. Like, trained individuals are most likely more motivated than untrained individuals because, well, they are training, and untrained individuals, there's a reason they're not training. And there's also research showing it works better in the morning. Now, that might be an actual physical effect, because the primary mechanism of action of caffeine is the adenosine receptors, basically combating sleepiness. Caffeine essentially directly undoes the effect of sleepiness. Mm-hmm. And in the morning, that effect is still more pronounced, and there are also negative biorhythm effects, like your body is not primed yet for performance early in the morning, unless you habitually train in the morning every time. Even then, it's a little contentious. So those motivation and undoing the negative circadian rhythm effects of training at a time you're unaccustomed to are probably the two primary actual mechanisms of action. Not so much original research in like the 70s and 80s thought about it was like glycogen sparing and improved fat oxidation. That all seems pretty trivial at this point. So it is mostly just a kick up the butt. And there is, in fact, a lot of very striking research about the placebo effects of caffeine. For example, there's research showing that one of my favorite studies, falsely believing you're on caffeine. So people that were given a capsule, which is actually a placebo, but were told this is caffeine, get a bigger boost in performance than people that get actual caffeine, but were told it's inert, it's the placebo. So that basically shows that the placebo effect can be larger than the actual physical effect of the caffeine. In fact, probably most research, I would say, aligns with that the placebo effect is larger. And funny enough, this is really, really ironic. The placebo effect does have a dose response effect. So even though there is no physical dose response effect of the caffeine, when people believe they were consuming more caffeine, they do, in some research at least, get a bigger boost in performance, which is very crazy, right? It's but placebo effects in general are super crazy. So
we should have included placebo as the number one supplement we're talking about today.
That's actually a good topic, because I think there is research showing that if you because that's sort of a semi-valid concern. It seems like it shouldn't be an argument, but it is logical. Like, if you tell people that their supplement was a placebo, aren't you reducing their gains? But there is actually research that placebo effects still work.
Oh, nice.
When you know it's a placebo.
That's awesome. That's a question I've had for a while, because sometimes I'll be like taking something, I'm like, I'm legit taking this supplement as a placebo.
Yeah, and just because,
and I'm like, wait a second, does that neutralize the effect?
Yeah, it still works.
It's too late.
Yeah.
Subconscious, like, you're not tricking me. This is the magic stuff. Oh man, that's great. Yeah, I think that, that's one of the interesting things about supplements, that I think caffeine is a good example of, where the benefits are actually somewhat indirect to, hardcore biological, like ergogenic aid. And I think that's one of the values of caffeine, is to, help you out on a tough day, or on a day where you didn't get as much sleep, or particularly at times when you're just not feeling motivated. For example, like for me, when I was in contest prep, or whenever I'm cutting, I will bring in caffeine, and I will deliberately avoid it at other times, so I'm relatively caffeine naive. What are your thoughts on a sort of caffeine cycling approach like that?
I think it's very good. The research on addiction on caffeine is very, very mixed. Because there was a recent meta-analysis that argued it's all a myth. Look, you can just keep taking it, you reap the benefits, you keep the benefits. To me, that is kind of the research that strikes me as just flying so hard in the face of common experience that it's hard to reconcile that. Like, is there anyone who really thinks you don't develop a tolerance to caffeine? You have people. I remember one time I was with friends, and we were hanging out in this house, and some people were like, okay, let's go to bed. And one of my friends was like, okay, yeah, I think I'm done too. So he got up and he came back, and he had this huge monster can of energy, and he sat down, and we like looked at him like, bruh. And he like downed the whole can, and we're like, we just discussed we're going to bed, and I'm sorry, but we're actually going to bed. And he's like, yeah, me too. Like, you just downed the whole can of Monster. It's like, yeah, it doesn't do anything anymore for me. So yeah, I mean, at that point, your tolerance. So the idea that there is no tolerance to caffeine is I mean, in terms of purely ergogenic effect, maybe there is some truth to it, because so much of the effect is psychological anyway, that you sort of maintain that benefit. but I do find it somewhat hard to believe. And if you separate the studies where they use caffeine chronically over time within subjects, those studies do tend to find tolerance. But if you look at the studies where they just give a certain dose of individuals and they correlate that based on how much they were habitually consuming, then there is still an effect in most of the studies, not all of them, but in most. Now, in the last meta-analysis, what they did is they corrected for the daily habitual consumption level. And they said, look, even when someone's already consuming 300 milligram caffeine per day, they still get an effect from 300 milligram caffeine. And that's like, well, for one, if you're used to consuming 3 coffees spread across the day with meals, that doesn't mean you're not going to respond anymore to 3 Red Bulls right now at one shot, right? That in itself is not that surprising. And that's basically what the meta-analysis measures. So I think that's the main thing. And then the second thing is a lot of research in psychology. I know this from my studies at behavioral psychology. The original caffeine research, which predates exercise science caffeine research by decades, had great difficulty separating the effects of the acute performance enhancing, mental performance enhancing in the case of psychology, the performance enhancing effects of caffeine from the anti-withdrawal effects. So it's very tricky because caffeine, I think, is literally the most consumed beverage in the world. I'm not even sure if water is more consumed. Probably water is number 1, but I think coffee is in terms of beverages, I think the number 1. And then it's tea, and then milk, I think. Coca-Cola is probably up there at this point. But it's so ubiquitous, as you say, that it's hard to find people that don't consume any coffee. And for a lot of people, it's also hard to, if you tell people like, okay, 4 days, no coffee. And then the first day they have headaches and they stand at the coffee machine at work. And it's like, well, just one. So that there's also a big compliance issue. And if you have them stop consuming caffeine for a few days, which is commonly done before these studies, and then they get a positive response on the caffeine, are they actually performing better than normal? Or is the caffeine undoing the withdrawal symptoms, and are they therefore performing less worse compared to the group that got the placebo and is now just in withdrawal with headaches and whatever? Now, there are 2 studies on endurance training where they actually did this, and they found no difference in the ergogenic effect between taking the caffeine right after habitual usage, after 2 days, or after 4 days of withdrawal. So that suggests maybe it is physical. But overall, the research is still pretty iffy. And I think commonly people, at least in the mental effects, most people would agree that if you respond to a certain dosage, that's going to decrease how much subjective effect you get from that. And considering there is no physical dose response effect, it's mostly about what you feel. So if you don't get the benefit in terms of sensation, I'd say moderate your dosage. So I'd say for most people, what you do is the smart way. Higher dosages should be reserved for A competitions, days when you really feel you need that extra kick of the butt, and the occasional morning workout that wasn't planned. And at other times, I'd say the rational approach is to take like 100 milligrams, which is like 1 cup of coffee, 1 Red Bull, or something. Actually, the form is best anhydrous. The anhydrous form is the best form, just powder or capsules. They work better than coffee or dissolved caffeine for unknown reasons. There seems to be negative interaction effects of some of the compounds in coffee. In any case, so about 100 milligrams of whatever form of caffeine floats your boat is or basically the minimum you need to feel an effect, and then stick with that. And if you notice tolerance, then go off for a little bit. You don't have to go off for a long time. 3 days, you already get a big effect. And even hardcore addiction is basically cured in 9 days.
Yeah, no, that's, I think, helpful for people. And I think that, having this kind of the cyclical approach is going to be, logically more useful. Although I think a lot of people, as you said, everyone is connected to the coffee line drip already. So, but that's interesting how, like, I think for a lot of people, the benefit you get is, literally just bring you back to baseline if you're such a chronic caffeine user. What is there an upper limit that people should be aware of for caffeine?
There is research showing that, especially in terms of psychological effects, at about 750 milligrams per day on average, you get complete tolerance. So then you become like my friends, where you down a monster before you go to bed. And I think that you definitely want to avoid, because then all you're doing is undoing withdrawal effects and you're just completely reliant on it to function normally. Yeah, I mean, that is actually a concern for some people, shockingly, especially with coffee, because coffee it's much more sneaky, it's not like the Red Bull shots. Although interestingly, there also seems to be a huge placebo effect with energy drinks. The fact that it's an energy drink and it has some fizzle and whatever seems to have more effect than any of the other additional ingredients, because those ingredients, when studied in isolation, they do nothing. And even when added to caffeine, there doesn't seem to be an interaction effect.
Wow. Menno and I are going to be coming out with a new brand of supplements called the placebo pill. Just a pill and a drink, a nice fizzy drink. Anyways, okay, yeah.
So whole lot of none.
Oh man. Okay, yeah. Moving on, wanted to talk about vitamins and minerals, and I think that the this is going to be like as a quick preface. I'm not giving any medical advice here on this show. This is purely from a bodybuilding perspective. But yeah, I think one of the first things to bring up is the main issue here is making sure that you're not deficient in a lot of these, where people think that, oh yeah, I'm going to take all this whole handful of specific vitamins and minerals, and they're all going to boost A, B, C, D, E functions and turn me into Superman. So yeah, if you could touch on that.
Yeah, the shotgun approach seems rational, but actually isn't, because the thing with most multivitamins and many supplements that have a lot of combination stuff is that they don't include the stuff that you actually need, because many of the things that people are actually likely to be deficient in, if your diet's remotely good, are mostly minerals, I would say, especially for strength trainees. And those are toxic in large amounts. So you won't find those in large amounts in most multivitamins. Like magnesium, iron. Iron is also very sex specific. So for women, it's a much bigger issue. For men, in fact, toxicity is probably the bigger issue. So because of these differences, most of the stuff that you're actually likely to be deficient in is the stuff you won't find in most multivitamins. And there are also issues with which isoforms they put in, like vitamin E. You get competitive inhibition and sometimes deficiency even of the isoforms that are not in the multivitamin. And you also get poor quality ingredients often. And then they put a lot of stuff in there of the stuff that you don't actually need. And it turns out that some of that stuff, such as vitamin C and E, actually turns out to be harmful in large amounts. So we now have good research showing that megadosing vitamin C and E poses such a strong anti-inflammatory effect that it also suppresses the inflammatory signal for muscle repair. So inflammation is a normal part of the muscle repair process. Inflammation has a very bad association, and that's mostly deserved. But inflammation mostly just means, hey, pay attention to me, to the immune system. And then the immune system comes and it starts paying attention to that area. And if you suppress that signal completely, it also suppresses muscle growth and strength development. And we see this especially from 500 milligrams, I think it is, milligrams vitamin C, that we see actual consistent effects. And 250, there's like some glimpers of it. And you don't need that much anyway. So the shotgun approach is actually quite risky. And there's also research that people that take multivitamins have higher mortality rates than people that don't. And that might be due to their worse health and stuff, but at least it means it's not working out as the panacea they intended to be.
Yeah. So yeah, are there any specific ones that you think people should be just cognizant of?
Yeah, actually, I think in terms of supplements, the ones I recommend the most are often vitamin D and minerals, like zinc, magnesium. If you don't consume dairy, it's calcium. It's very, very diet dependent. If you don't consume, this is more, not really a micro, but omega-3s is also very much like, do you consume fish? No? Well, then you probably need that. For iron, it's like, do you consume shellfish or red meat? If not, well, especially if you're female, then there's a good chance you need it, especially if you're also doing endurance training alongside it. And if you still have a regular menstrual cycle, then your iron requirements are super, super high. So for those individuals, it's often like, yeah, you probably want some of that, but it really depends on the diet. And for some, it depends on the form, like magnesium. The vast majority of magnesium forms on the market are crap. The bioavailability is like a few %. And magnesium oxide poses more digestive issues and problems than it actually cures anything. So I generally recommend magnesium citrate because it's high quality. There are a few other forms that are okay, but magnesium citrate is very cheap and relatively easy to find and very well established to have at least decent bioavailability.
Yeah, no, it's a good point that a lot of this comes down to your diet, and the vitamin D is a good point where if anyone's living in a more northern latitude, you should be thinking about vitamin D.
Yeah, even if you're not, honestly, like probably most people that don't have a tan should at least consider it.
Yeah, how much would you recommend people take?
I think an average is like 4,000 IUs. That's what most studies find. Then you get levels that are for like 2 standard deviations above average in the population satisfactory, as in more than 50, nanomole per liter, I think is the range. And you get below toxicity levels. Now, toxicity levels is like 200. So that's 4 times as much. And you typically need like 20,000 IUs consistently to even get there. And I myself have had 180 after very long-term supplementation of 5,000 IUs a day. And I've seen that once more or 2 times more in people. So some people absorb a lot. And if you also get some sun, you can actually somewhat get there, but it's still very rare. So toxicity is very, very rare. And I think there's now pretty much a consensus among the more in the know people that most public health authorities have colossally underestimated vitamin D requirements. Like they still say 400 IUs is literally 10 times too little. And then they say like, well, there's very little risk of developing rickets. It's like, yeah, well, I have somewhat higher health standards than not getting rickets, So when I get like bone malabsorption and stuff, it's like, at that point, you have bigger issues. So I'm concerned about my gains, So on that note, by the way, you also don't get much benefit from being over 50, but up to 50, there are quite some studies showing like benefits for testosterone, bone health, strength gains, muscle growth in some research. It's not big effects and stuff, but it's also super cheap and very low risk.
Yeah, and then in terms of the omega-3s, what should people be taking?
Mostly fish, I would say. It's actually interesting. There was a paper on this, 2 papers. There's one in the US and one in Australia and New Zealand, where they looked at 32 brands. And Australia and New Zealand are generally renowned for their high production quality standards when it comes to food. So it's not going to be better in other places. And out of the 32, 1 passed all their tests. It was about only a third, only 3 out of 32 even had what was on the label in the first place. And over 80%, also including those, those 3, and then you're left with 1, had toxicity and oxidized fatty acids. And that's a huge, huge problem, because the whole idea of omega-3s is that they're not oxidized so that you get anti-inflammatory effects. And when they're oxidized, you're literally paying for poison. So there is research showing as well that especially in overweight individuals, because they have high levels of systemic inflammation anyway, so the oxidation risk increases even more when they consume them, that they actually get worse health outcomes and they get more inflammation and they get cardiovascular side effects. So the form for omega-3 supplements is super, super important. It's so important that if you're not consuming fish, there's like a handful, I think 6 different brands that I've seen with my own eyes, independent lab work, that what they claim is on the label, and the fatty acids are not oxidized. And in almost all cases, they are natural triglycerides. So all of that, if you see on the label, high concentration, super concentration, better form or whatever, stay away. Those all mean processed to crap. You want the natural form. You want it to be as close to fish as possible. So if you actually get fish oil, like literal salmon oil, that's generally good if it's not gone rancid yet. So if it's stored well and stuff, and the heavy metal poisoning and stuff is not really a concern anymore. That's one of the few things where health authorities have actually doubled down on that. So I wouldn't worry about that. It's what all the supplement companies flaunt with, like no heavy metal poisoning. It's like, yeah, no heavy metal poisoning. Also no omega-3s, but no heavy metals. And so Yeah, the form's super important. And the brands I've seen are out of memory, Rosita's, Gero, which ones were good? Gero was probably, oh yeah, Athletic Greens. And there were a few more. I don't know. One krill oil, specific brands. But yeah, it's like a few brands. Athletic Greens is generally a good brand. Gero is good. Rosita's is good. But Rosita's has like certain liver oil with also a lot of vitamin A and stuff. So you can't take too much without getting vitamin A toxicity. But they seem to be legit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I just take fish oil myself. It's easier. And yeah, like this was something interesting where looking at the shelves, I found that, yeah, the labels on these supplements was very confusing. Let's say someone is, yeah, looking for a fish oil supplement or something to cover their omega-3s. What do they actually look for on the label? You know, in terms, they will mention like EPA, DHA.
Yeah, the EPA and DHA content are what matter most. You want both. Research is a bit equivocal about which forms is better, but I'd say you just want both. And you want, like for most intents and purposes, 2 grams per day of actual EPA plus DHA. So not just the fish oil, not just the total fat, but the actual EPA plus DHA, those combined. At 2 grams, you're pretty much maxed out. And then I think the World Health Organization also says, like, at that point, even for people with cardiovascular risk, you're sort of maxed out. But there is a recent study, or even a few, where they found that megadosing does have more benefits. And there is at least one study which found up to 5 or even 8 grams, there was a slight improvement in recovery from training. But it becomes, you definitely get major diminishing returns after 2 grams. And after, I'd say the minimum is like half a gram. And then you get sort of your most bases covered, like the basics, the essentials. And then at 2 grams, you have most bases covered in terms of near maximal effects. And then it's questionable if you get more going up to 3. Some people, I go up to 3. It can compensate for like slightly worse diet quality and health to some degree. Then the other thing you want to look at the label is that unless it's one of the reputed brands, that it's a natural triglyceride oil. Those are often much better because it basically means it's the actual oil, maybe filtered and stuff, but it's not processed. Normally, what they do is the re-esterified oil, which basically means they pull it all apart, they get the compounds they want, and they sort of put those back together. And then it often destroys the oils and it oxidizes them. So the risk is much, much higher.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, that coincides with my understanding. And yeah, just to reemphasize for people that, you know, we're talking about fish oils here, you can get this from eating fatty fish as well.
Yeah, it's even better. Then you don't have any of the risks. And then like 100 grams of fatty fish per day on average is enough. I mean, it depends on how you look at it. For some people, that's like, oh, I love fish, so that's easy. And other people are like, I need to eat salmon every single day. That's really hard. One nice thing is that you don't have to eat it every day. You can have like 700 grams. That's a lot, but you can have like 700 grams on Sunday every week, and then you're also covered.
Yeah, oh, that's good to know. Okay, moving on to melatonin. I think this is another really interesting one from the perspective of bodybuilding, which we'll get into. So basically, melatonin helps us regulate our sleep cycle.
Yeah, it's a very, if you have circadian rhythm disturbances or disorders like me, I have done 24. So my natural cycle isn't 24 hours. Like for most people, it's not 24 hours. It's like 24 and a half or something, but it's pretty close to 24. And for me, it's more like 26 or 26 and a half or something. So I don't get tired at night, which is great for all-nighters and needing a driver at night, but it's really bad for living. So I need very meticulous circadian rhythm control. And even then I still benefit from melatonin supplementation. And what you normally only see in jet-lagged individuals, I also benefit from 5 milligrams. Normally the cap is like 3. Because just like with the creatine, there is a limit to, depending on how much your body naturally produces, you can add some extra, but at some point you maximize the effect that you can get. For most people, that's like at 3 milligrams, if at all. Like if you don't have sleep problems, you don't need melatonin. And melatonin also mostly helps you fall asleep. So many people think it's like it improves sleep quality, so you don't need to sleep as much. No, sorry, it doesn't work. It's help you stay asleep, barely. Like in some research, maybe the first few hours, but very little effect. So it's mostly just if you have trouble falling asleep, and it's not due to stress or not having a nighttime routine. It's really because your body's not producing the melatonin it needs. So general sleep optimization advice of, like avoiding bright light exposure, especially blue lights in the later part of the day, in the last few hours before bedtime, not having a kind of monster before you go to bed. That all applies. Oh, by the way, speaking of which, the intersection of sleep and caffeine, the magnitudes of caffeine's negative effects on sleep quality are generally really underappreciated. There is research showing that a single double espresso consumed in the morning still impairs sleep quality that night, which is crazy subjectively because it means that the objective negative physical effects persist far beyond the subjective effects. And that's in part due to receptor downregulation of the effect that you get subjectively. And probably it's because that is the strongest effect caffeine has, wakefulness, promoting wakefulness. So even you sort of have ultra wakefulness when you feel extra aroused from caffeine, but just preventing you from sleeping optimally. You only need like a tiny bit of caffeine to do that. And then, there's melatonin. I guess it somewhat counteracts the effect of caffeine in this way, but not directly. They're different effects.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, circling back to caffeine, but this is kind of a trigger for me where, like people forget that caffeine has a really long half-life of like 5 hours. So what you take in the morning, there's still going to be some of that floating around at night, and it will impact your sleep. And especially when you get to these higher doses.
Yeah. And the half-life is on average like 5 hours, but there are individuals, and we know from genetic research that vary a lot in how much they genetically vary in their speed of absorption of the caffeine. And there are people in who the half-life is, I think the highest recorded I've seen is 9.5 hours. So if you take a lot of caffeine in the morning, you're one of those individuals, for sure, it's going to impact your sleep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but anyways, coming back to melatonin, the value of melatonin here to emphasize for people is that you're regulating your sleep cycle. So you're not using it to actually make you sleep. So this isn't something that you should be taking every day, year round, all the time. Like you should probably be trying to fix your sleep quality using sleep hygiene and all that other stuff. But it can be helpful for people in terms of if you jet lag, or if you're coming off of especially for myself, I use it quite a bit because I do a lot of shift work, like late night work. So it can help me regulate my time, my clock. And the other thing is that I think that people end up taking too much. Like what would you say people should start with if they are just taking
you can take 3 milligrams and then just get max effect. It depends a bit on the scenario. Like if you're jet lagged or something, if you just had night shift work, I think you can do 3 or even 5, just get for the full effect. But if you're just taking it, and especially if you notice any adverse effects, which is rare, and normally it's very safe, there's no tolerance or addiction or any of that. But then it's in general, why put more in your body than you need? So I'd err on the side of maybe 2, and then maybe building off the dosage so that you can even get off it. Because most people shouldn't need it in the first place, right? Like you say, it's for special occasions mostly, or I think most commonly for the average individual, if they want to go to bed earlier than normally. So if you're now consistently going to bed at nighttime, like midnight, and you want to reset that and go to bed at 10, you may not be sleepy at the 10. So that's where melatonin can be a godsend to make you fall asleep earlier. And then once you have your rhythm set, and like you say, you've optimized your sleep hygiene, at that point, you should be able to get off it. And some people like me may need it continuously, but for most people, you should just be able to come off it completely.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's another big point that people, reason to use it on a semi-regular basis, kind of a once a week thing, or rather than a once a day thing. But, say if you've been partying with Menno all weekend and you've been up late and you want to get up Monday morning for work, then it could help you get you to sleep a bit earlier. So that was great. Moving on, I wanted to touch on a couple of pre-workout supplements. What are your thoughts on L-citrulline?
L-citrulline is very promising, but I think we have only one study that actually measured long-term muscle growth. Only one, and it's found no effect. Now the dosage wasn't very high, so you could argue they need more. And the other thing is the effect on work capacity and especially lower rep strength training is not major. It's really more for endurance, strength, endurance, those kind of things. There can be some effect, and in meta-analytic research, you do see it on average, adds a rep or two here and there to your workouts in the gym. But does that really have an effect? Now, for one, the effect may not be large enough to be meaningful. Secondly, it's sort of reverse KAATSU, like blood flow restriction training works because it increases your metabolic stress. And citrulline basically acts as a buffer against metabolic stress. So is that actually beneficial, right? Because neuromuscular fatigue in form of metabolic stress, like peripheral neuromuscular fatigue, lowers the recruitment threshold of the higher threshold motor units. So it basically increases muscle activity to compensate for the presence of the fatigue. And that's why you can get good results with light weights if you just do enough of them and go to failure. Or with blood flow restriction, you can use really light weights and then still get maximal recruitment or full recruitment and sufficient levels of muscle activity to reach maximum muscle growth. With the citrulline and beta-alanine is kind of the same thing. It's really questionable if that is even a positive effect to begin with. And then the research itself is still not super clear. Recently, I think 2 weeks ago or something, I posted about a study which showed that caffeine was actually more ergogenic than caffeine plus a whole bunch of pre-workout stuff, including citrulline, at a decent dosage. So that's another win for pure anhydrous caffeine, but also makes you wonder, if you're consuming these cocktails or pre-workouts, how much negative synergy is there? Because there's always this idea, well, this is potentially good, this is potentially good, this is potentially good. Let's throw it all together and you get ultra good, But maybe there's negative synergy. And we know that even in some things like coffee, there is negative synergy between the caffeine and some of the substances in the coffee itself. And then we know that there's also a few studies showing negative synergy between caffeine and creatine. So there are multiple of these cases where there can actually be negative interaction effects. And it's not just a matter of, again, just consuming more of everything is not necessarily the best approach.
That's so funny. Yeah, I know that would be an interesting research, project to look at the interaction between bodybuilding supplements. Because like people, the list of these supplements are crazy. Like it's just like 20 different things. And reminds me of when you have patients who have polypharmacy, like so many drugs, and it's just like, I remember once one of my classmates being like, what if you just took them all off it, like everything? It's just like, oh man, scary.
Yeah, this with polypharmacy and they are much more strict in what they allow in terms of combining and interaction effects. With supplements, it's like, what do you want?
No holds barred. Yeah, exactly.
All of it.
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay. I also want to bring up ashwagandha. I think this has been getting quite a bit of attention recently.
Yeah, the main thing with ashwagandha is it's super promising if you look at the individual studies. And then if you look at the studies, positive and negative, and you separate them by country of origin, then you suddenly see like positive research, basically exclusively India, and then negative research everywhere else. And it's like, it's their, what's it, Aruyin, what's the medicine tradition? I don't know how to pronounce it. Ayurvan, whatever. Standard Indian sort of folk medicine tradition. It's big there, and there have been multiple cases of research from India frauding stuff from India before, and of course that doesn't mean all of these researchers are in on these things and whatever, but it is certainly something to pay attention to. And I'd wait until the miraculous effects we see on like improved muscle growth and the like, those are really shady studies. Right now, we see that it can have an anxiolytic effect, so it may reduce anxiety. It may buffer against general stress responsiveness as an adaptogen. But in terms of like what we know concretely, what I'd say with decent scientific evidence, we know that it does, and especially where we also see anecdotally, like there is something there, not much. Like I didn't notice anything from taking it. Of course, the effects are often too small to notice anything, which is why a lot of people become disillusioned with supplements in general. But yeah, I'd say this is one of the same with what is it, betaine. There you also see like basically all the positive research is industry sponsored, and it's like a literal 100% split. Like all the positive is industry sponsored, and all the negative is independent. And there's no overlap. And then you really wonder like, okay, that's with such a clear split, I'm become really skeptical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's funny about the country dependence that you mentioned. How about HMB? It's another one I get commonly asked about.
Oh yeah. HMB is like, in general, we take protein, and then researchers have thought like, instead of the general idea, like we want everything in the protein.
Yeah.
Supplement manufacturers have come up with increasingly new ways to extract further and further and further and further down, because they were like, okay, no, this is better than protein. This is just the essential proteins, just the essential amino acids. And they're like, don't you also want the non-essential ones? They also increase protein synthesis. And it's like, no, these are the essential ones. Look, essential is better than non-essential. Can't you hear? And then it's like, even better than just the essential ones. What if we ditch all the others and we just sell you the BCAAs, and we sell them for more than getting the BCAAs plus all the others together, because you're just getting the BCAAs, right? And then what if we don't just sell you the BCAAs? We're just selling you leucine for even more than the price of the BCAAs together, right? So now, not only do you not get all the other proteins, you don't even get the other BCAAs anymore. And now, what if we don't sell you the leucine? Instead, we just give you leucine extract. And then we have HMB. And then you bribe some researchers to publish a study saying it induces miraculous growth. One of the few studies where there are a lot of, like almost all the top researchers, I would say, in exercise science have signed that letter, myself included, saying we don't believe this study by Jacob Wilson et al., which showed that HMB literally worked better than steroids. Like the gains in that study were larger than you'd see in research on androgenic anabolic steroids of like 600 milligram per week, which is like six-fold super anabolic, super physiological. So yeah, other than that, it's mostly super disappointing, and it doesn't make sense. Like the whole idea is like you're just reducing stuff. You have the effects of protein, and then you're just getting less of the effect of protein. And you see this in research as well. Like essential amino acids don't stimulate protein as much as also including the non-essential amino acids. BCAAs don't even stimulate muscle protein synthesis at all when there's no substrate of the other amino acids. And so the more you break it down, even we see some mixes like casein and whey together stimulate more protein balance than just whey, typically, especially when you measure it more than 6 hours. Because that's another thing, researchers love to bias the study duration so they can see like whey gives a big spike in MPS. But then after 6 hours, you see casein actually wins out. But casein sucks. Casein is really hard to sell. It's really sticky, super thick. Like unflavored casein is like really hard to even consume. Like it's physically hard to consume it. So yeah, there's not much of a market there. So yeah, I'm really not a fan of anything. If it's protein, it's just you get the whole thing.
Exactly.
And you get that in Whole Foods.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. Where I think basically this was kind of the other list of supplements to strike out. Like anything where you're taking a derivative of protein or like one component of it. Like why not just take the whole protein? So yeah, that covers EAAs, BCAAs, and a whole list of basically any amino acid. People find a way to market it or something. And anyways, so there goes our supplement sponsorships out the window. As you guys can tell, this is a non-sponsored video. But yeah, this has been great. This has been a great chat. And I think this will dispel a lot of myths about supplements out there for people. What's new with you these days, Menno? What's happening with yourself from, say, like a training and bodybuilding perspective?
Not much. I got a big back injury some time ago.
Oh, ouch.
And I get the MRI scan in a few days, the result.
Oh, that
should have gone that much earlier. Yeah, it's bad. I thought it was a torn quadratus lumborum, but based on the recovery time, I'm now starting to think it's a fracture, actually.
Ooh.
So
you should send me the images.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, definitely. Probably trust you more than the the local docs here. So
yeah. And then anything new cooking in terms of research?
Not so much. I've posted about, there were some interesting new studies recently, but in terms of my actual publications, there's the intermittent fasting study, which is still on hold. And I'm just working a lot on my PT course at the moment. And probably by the time this up, I hope to have guides ready for beginner female trainees. So there's very little, I think, material that's like super succinct, where you can just tell people, okay, this is in one article, like what you need to know to get started, you know, for like New Year's crowd or women that want to start lifting weights. A lot of stuff for men, but not so much for women. So I wrote a guide which like really the essentials, not going into macro tracking and all this stuff, but just the real essentials of living a healthy diet and just a very basic standard strength training program.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that will really benefit the community, I think, because as you said, there's a lot of, you know, male directed material out there, and for a lot of females, they see this, so they see like some massive bodybuilder flexing on an article, and they're just like, well, this isn't for me, and then they just go to some, you know, bro science or girl bro science. So anyways, yeah, it was great to catch up, Menno.
My pleasure.
Where can people find you?
MennoHenselmans.com. Probably best way, if you're not following me yet, is to, if you go to my website, and then you'll see my newsletter subscription box. You get a free tour of my most popular contents, a lot of also the new stuff I publish and post, and also the stuff that just people like the most. So that's probably the best way to get familiar with my contents.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, I'll link that in the description below. And for any aspiring PTs or people who just want to up their knowledge, Menno has a personal training course, which is top notch, would recommend. So Thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure.